Well, I need you to go ahead and find in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the book of Genesis, chapter 3. We're just going to have one verse. I'm going to kind of touch on some other verses or ideas as we go. But we'll draw most of what we've got from Genesis 3:20. So, one of the things that I was thinking about this past week was that vision helps you to understand value. Vision helps you to understand value. Here's what I mean. I read a story about a guy named Orv Johansson. And Orv Johansson owned a collectible shop down in Largo, Florida. And one day, it was a Saturday, I think, and it was a pretty busy day, and he had a lot of different customers coming, and he likes to take care of his customers, he said. And so he was kind of taking care of those folks, and all sorts of people had different questions or wanted to make purchases, but he noticed that a fella came in with just kind of a plain box. And it's kind of like he was waiting to talk to Orv. You know, you kind of have that, we're just kind of lingering about kind of thing, like I'm kind of not going to assert myself, but I'm just kind of staying back here a little bit to talk to somebody. And so, but anytime that Orv started to kind of connect with the guy, someone else came with a question or a purchase or whatever. And after a while, out of the corner of his eye, Orv noticed that the guy left. He headed for the door and was back and out on the sidewalk, and something in Orv said, I can't let this guy go with just having not ever even said hi. So he excused himself from the conversation, caught the guy, and kind of walked him back in, and come to find out the guy was there and he was wanting to see. He had some things he wanted Orv to look at to see if Orv might be willing to buy some of them. And so he looked in the box, and there's a pack of cigarettes. And then there's also a mishmash of baseball cards from the 1950s and 60s. And Orv looked into this ratty old box, and he looked at the cigarettes and the cards, and he said, let's talk. So they went back in the store, and they sat down, and about $3,000 in merchandise and currency later, Orv Johansson bought the box. He said that the baseball cards had a little value. But you know what he was after? The pack of cigarettes. You know why he was after the pack of cigarettes? They were Piedmont brand. Have you ever heard of Piedmont brand cigarettes? I haven't either. They came out before World War I. And Piedmont was one of about 15 different tobacco companies that when they put out their packages of cigarettes, they would insert cards in the cigarettes. The card line was called T206. And T206, that card line, sometimes would be like military images, but also it might be nature scenes, but it also would be baseball players. And Orv Johansson realized that whatever card was in this unopened pack of cigarettes was likely in mint condition, with vivid colors. He said, now, the better than even chance that it was going to be a baseball card, because that was kind of the dominant part of the T206 line. But there would be a chance that in that T206 mint condition card in an unopened pack of cigarettes from 1910, there might be Ty Cobb. There might be some other players from the early years of baseball. And there may even be the crown jewel of all collectors for baseball cards, which is, anyone know? Honus Wagner. Everyone thinks Mickey Mantle. Honus Wagner. Honus Wagner, He was a star, but also he had an objection that he didn't want kids to have to buy cigarettes in order to get his card. And so he said, I'm not going to do that because that's actually going to invite kids to be buying tobacco. And he said he didn't want to do that. So he told them, no longer may you use my image. But there were some Honus Wagner cards that got in. Any idea what Honus Wagner T206 cards go for? On auction, they go anywhere from $1.8 to $2.1 million. You know what? If it was me, I would have seen a really old pack of cigarettes. Orv Johansson had vision. And because of that vision, he understood value. Want to know what was in that pack of cigarettes? Cigarettes. We don't know. He didn't open it. Today's Mother's Day. That isn't news. We want to honor mothers on Mother's Day. That isn't news. But I think sometimes if there's some vision, maybe a higher vision about mothers, we may understand and be able to value them even better. Last week we talked about a biblical vision for families. This week, I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about the Bible's vision about mothers. I'm just going to give you a handful of things about the biblical vision in terms of mothers. Okay? Here's the first. Mothers are of high value because you are mothers, the nurturers of life. Genesis 3:20. The man names the woman, and he names her, come on, you know, Eve. Eve's a pretty name. Genesis 3:20 says he named her Eve because she's the mother of all living. Literally it means life or life source. Mothers, you are the nurturers of life. The child that was conceived in you, you carried that body in your body. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. That life physically was fully dependent on you. I remember it was an interesting and kind of a awe-inspiring time when the birth of our firstborn. And I remember I was watching as Jen nursed him, and I thought, he's drawing every bit of his life from her. Mothers, that's the biblical vision for you. You are the nurturers of life. But it's not just physical life. We can kind of put that part together, right? Their body's in your body, right? They attach to your body for their nourishment. We get that. But let's take it a step further. Clinical research. Frank Lake talks about this. That the infant, that child, derives their sense of belonging from your face. You are the source, you are the nurturer of life, not just physically, but relationally. Do you understand that? Do we understand that? What is the face that the child looks at when they're nursing? The mother's face, her eyes, her expression. And that expression does and says everything to this child. It gives them a sense of acceptance and belonging. That's where we get our sense of acceptance and belonging, is from the mother's face. And our sense of relationships form from that point. What we see in her face, what we see in her eyes, what we feel from her hands, what we sense and experience as we're held in her arms. Those are the things that shape us and deeply embed things in us relationally. There are things that you don't realize that you've received from your mother. I don't just mean genetically. I don't just mean in terms of nourishment. I mean in terms of relationship. That's a high vision. I'll press it a little bit further. You're the source of life. You're the nurturer of life to your children spiritually. Do you see why? I read an article a while back about a fellow who talked about his drug problem that wasn't really a problem. He talks about that his mom drug him to church. And that was his drug problem. That wasn't really a problem because of all the benefit that came because she saw that as important. But I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper than that. I believe that our first impressions about God, even before we're conscious about that, are formed from the care that we get from our mother. Where are we going to get our idea that there is a presence that keeps us safe, that would guide us, that would hold us, that would sing over us? Our very first impressions of God, before we're even fully conscious of God, they come from our mother. Isn't that an amazing vision? Mothers, you are the nurturers of life. Not just physically, relationally, and spiritually. Now, do you see the enormous, if you will, responsibility that comes with that vision? What are you giving your child? What have you given your children? That's part one of the vision. Here's another part of the vision. Mothers are the makers of distinction. Mothers are the makers of distinction. Here's what I mean. At some point, the distinction between me and thee, the distinction between mother and child, has to start being made, both with Sarah in the Old Testament and with Hannah in the Old Testament. A particular emphasis is made upon them weaning the child. Do you understand what that is? That's not simply a natural growth progression. It's also this idea. To wean the child means you are creating a distinction between you and them. Make sense? I am me, you're not. You are you. You are a life independent of me. That is crucial for someone's life and development. It's crucial for the life and development of your child. Mothers need to create. You need to be creators of distinction. And here's why. Because children need, here's a fancy expression, self-differentiation. They are their own person. Mothers have to do this. One of the phenomena that we hear about now, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, helicopter parents, which means they have never created or made healthy distinction between them and their child. And so now their child has never become an adult. They're simply an independent child. They've never developed their own sense of self and who they are apart from their mother. And that's a colossal failure. Weaning the child means we create distinction between us and the child. We help them understand that the two of us, that there are two of us, not 1 3/4. They are a whole life. We get confused between the bonds of motherhood versus being conjoined. Scriptures have good things to say about the bonds of family. It never suggests that we should stay conjoined to our children. Who's going to draw that distinction? The mother. Weaning the child is the picture of drawing distinction. What's more, when you get into the self-differentiation and you are your own self, it also means that you can nudge them toward discovery about who God's made them to be and how He's made them and what gifts and what talents and what interests they have. That's part of the biblical vision. You following me? Mothers, you are the nurturers of life, and that is unspeakably. It's an unspeakable honor and vision. You are also the makers of distinction between you and your child. Here's another one. Moms, you are the trainers of what's been trusted to you. You are the trainers of what's been trusted to you. It is upon you. It is your calling to invest in your child, so that they become a decent human being. You all know Jen and I worked at Basher Children's Home for 5 years. Saw all sorts of damaged kids coming through. And one of the things that happened to us through those 5 years is that when Jen and I would be out in public, and we would be at Walmart, we'd be at the restaurant, we'd be at the drugstore, and we would see parents with their children. There were times that Jen and I would turn to each other and say, "They'll be one of ours." The train is on the tracks. Why? Because the mothers were not trainers of what had been trusted to them in terms of to produce a decent human being. And a decent human being comes about not by accident, not by incident. It comes about through discipline and encouragement. You remove either of those, they're probably headed Basher way. I'm going to go off script here a little bit and give a couple of things as far as for discipline real quick. I'll give you some stuff for both of them. How's that? Number one, the reason I am qualified to do that is that between us, Jennifer and I, we have not produced any axe murderers yet. That's our qualification. Yet. Which one do you want first? Discipline or encouragement? Let's go discipline. You want to? Discipline. When you discipline your children, and you must discipline your children, when you discipline your children, it must be coherent. It must have some connection to what you're trying to produce in this child. And to simply say it's been a bad day for me, and that's why I'm disciplining you. No. That's not coherent. It hit me the wrong way. I don't care if it hit you the wrong way. That's no basis for discipline. Discipline has to be coherent. It has to be rooted in a particular principle and a particular goal. In our family, we spanked. I got quite a few myself. No. We only spanked for 2 reasons. 1, disrespect. Why? Because I want to produce a child who's respectful. 2, defiance. I don't want a child I don't want a child or offer to the world a child that doesn't understand or respect appropriate authority. It'll get him killed or get someone else killed. So for me, discipline is, you know what? I am going to associate and want them to associate physical pain with disrespect or defiance. That's what we came to. I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying that's what we came to. I'm not going to punish my kid. I'm not going to discipline my child for having emotions. Kids have emotions. We need to teach them how to express the emotions. You don't punish them for it, right? Kids spill things when they're little. That's what kids do. You don't discipline them for it. You teach them how to do it better. It must be coherent. This isn't even supposed to be the main part of the sermon. Coherent needs to be absolutely clear. This point of correction, this point of discipline is coming because I'm going to connect the dots for you. This is why this discipline is coming to you. So they understand. When I do this, it leads to this. And I am not to do it because of this. Make it clear. Finally, consistent. Discipline has to be consistent. This is going to cost me a cheeseburger, and I don't care. Here we go. Years ago, when our guys were little, we were backyard neighbors. There was no fences between our backyard neighbors. You know what I'm talking about? It's kind of like this big open playing thing. They had a sandbox there. And we'd already told our guys, you may not play in the sandbox, that's the neighbors. You can't play with that unless you ask permission. And if no one's around, then there's no one to ask permission of, so you can't use it. Seems simple, straightforward, right? I'm standing here talking to our other neighbor, Jen and I are. And we were chatting about something, and one of our kids, who was kind of wandering over to the sandbox, and we said, hey, no one's there. You may not. So they kind of inched back. And then we continued our conversation. And then it's like the gravitational pull. It was just pulling them. And so Jen turned, called the anonymous folks by name, and said, 1. And the anonymous folks turned and walked back to us. And our neighbor was there saying, how did you do that? We'd be hollering, screaming. We'd be well past 3 on our way to 5, 6, and 7 with more threats to go. And Jen said, he knows what happens when we get to 3. Every time. Every time. You produce a decent human being when there's discipline that's coherent, that's very clear, and that's consistent every time. Now, I'll tell you about the encouragement real quick, okay? Encouragement. Number 1, don't be afraid to use it. Number 2, use it for present achievement only. You don't encourage about what they were going to somewhere. Do you encourage what they've done? And third, you make it appropriate to what they've done. When our guys would top the stairs when they were 3 years old, we would cheer, yeah, way to go, you made it all the way up to the stairs. When they're 13, it doesn't mean so much when you do that. It means next to nothing. Well done, you got those stairs. Yeah, thanks, Dad. Okay. Now, but here's the other part. You are the trainers, which means conditioning. But it's not just to produce a decent human being. I need to put this one out here. Mothers, you're a trainer of what's been trusted to you so that they become a disciple of Jesus. You are a trainer of what's been trusted so that they become a disciple of Jesus. I saw the picture, I don't know where, probably Facebook. It had something that just stopped me in the tracks. It said, if we don't teach our children to follow Jesus, the world will teach them not to. If we don't teach our children to follow Jesus, the world will teach them not to. You are to be the trainer of what's been trusted to you, not just for a decent human being, but for a follower of Jesus. This ain't no mountain high enough. This is very practical and very applicable. Here you go. You ready? You example it to your kids, and then you explain it to your kids. I wanted to honor my mom for Mother's Day. She's a remarkable lady. And I don't usually post a lot of stuff, Facebook-y stuff, but I did this time, and I told the story of me in Little League. And I was on a really good team, but I was the first year, which meant I never played. But we won every game, because my brother's a star, and I'm an important member of the team. But we didn't live very far from the Little League field, and my mom didn't drive anyway, so after the game, I've got my glove and my hat, and we're walking, I've got my uniform, and we're walking up, as far as through the gravel, through the parking lot, and a guy comes, we kind of see him, and he's a ways away, and he hadn't shaved, he's kind of rough looking, and he comes, and I'm already thinking, I'm 9 years old, I'm thinking, this guy's not very much, and he calls out, and he says to my mom and me, he said, "Who beat?" I'm 9 years old, and I know that's not very good English. And I didn't answer him. I pretended like I didn't hear him. And then he got a little bit closer, and he said it again, "Who beat?" I didn't say anything. I just wanted him to go away or let me get away somehow. And that's when I felt the hand on my shoulder. And my mom's voice, she's always gracious, but she said, "Barney, this gentleman just asked you a question." And I didn't really look up at him. I just looked at my glove. And I said, "We won." So I was explaining to him how he should have asked. Not this who beat stuff, it's who won. And then Mom stepped in and she said, "It was a good game. Thank you for asking." And then they kind of trailed off talking about the game he was coming in to watch and who he was watching and the different teams. And the hand came back to my shoulder to steer me on our walk home. And as we were walking home, my mom said, "I never want to see that from you again." This man was not well dressed or well spoken, but he was kinder to you than you were to him. You show who you are by how you treat people, and it doesn't matter how they're dressed or how they talk. And I was 9 years old. And I saw my mom do that. And she then explained it to me. So that's been lodged in my memory for over 20 years now. You know what happened there? You see the beauty of it, the glory of it? It was this. My mom was training what had been trusted to her, not just to be a decent human being, but to be someone who would follow Jesus. And she showed me how to do it, and then she told me. Then she explained it. Mothers, that's your calling. That's the vision for you. There's one more, and I know I'm out of time. Mothers, the vision for you is to be those who dream of your children. That you dream of them. Dream of what they can achieve. But do more than that. Dream of what they can become. And the mothers that I know, they also dream of their child's contentment. I hear it again and again. My great hope is just that they'll be happy. That they'll find contentment in their life.